Hey guys, this will be a quick one, I promise. But I just want to throw my thoughts out there on the new Dragon's Dogma anime that's on Netflix. I don't typically, I've never done any anime reviews, and for the most part, I'm going to keep it that way. But I thought, well, this one's based on a video game, and the Castlevania anime was actually pretty good. So why not check out the Dragon's Dogma anime, right? And if you guys have seen my top 10 games you should play video, or you refuse to play video, you know that I like Dragon's Dogma a lot. Spoilers for that video. It was number one. And yeah, I mean, Dragon's Dogma is a fantastic action RPG. If you take away anything from this video, you should play that game if you haven't. It's very fun. Somewhat flawed, but a great game. So the question is, how is the anime? Well, the short version is, it sucks. Don't watch it. But yeah, basically this review is going to be split into two parts, starting with the spoiler-free section, and if you've already seen it, feel free to skip to this timestamp to get to the spoiler section, where I'll talk about the specifics and how it relates to the game. But one important thing to note about this review is I can't really show you any footage from the show for legal reasons. I will show heavily altered clips that were featured in trailers, interspersed with my gameplay footage, to give you an idea, right? But, you guys should know this, that I can't show you this stuff. So, yeah, honestly, just play the game. Really, just play the game. Don't watch this anime, okay? It's okay. It's a bad adaptation. It really is a bad adaptation. Now, if you have no plans to play the game, and you only care about watching a decent anime, yeah, it's kind of worth your time. It's fairly short. It's only about 2.5 to 3 hours of content. It's 7 22-minute episodes, right? So, it's entertaining enough to watch all the way through, I would say. Mostly just for the action bits. My main problems with the show, without giving any story spoilers, are that, one, the only real characters are the main character and his pawn, and, well, his family, which they die in the first episode. It's not really a spoiler, that even the trailer gives that away. Every other character, you will just forget their name instantly, because the truth is this show is a Monster of the Week show. There's very little overarching plot. Every single episode is just, you fight whatever monster from the game they decided to animate for this episode, right? And that's probably the most faithful part to the game, in that, the models are pretty much one-to-one, except the Cyclops is, massive in the show. There was one Cyclops in the game, specifically the Dark Arisen expansion, that was that size, but most Cyclopses in the game were, less than half that tall. But it was still pretty cool that they made him, so massive. But notably, they left out the Chimera and Ogres, which the Ogres are fine, I guess. But the Chimera is, one of the main monsters advertised for the game. Anybody who's played it remembers, especially just the intro sequence, where you fight, a Chimera literally in the first 15 minutes of the game. So it's kind of weird that they don't have a Chimera in this. But, yeah, I don't know. I'd say it's okay for the action. The biggest problem with it is that it's 3D animated, and anyone who watches anime knows that, their 3D animation is pretty rough. They always try to, mimic a 2D style, but it always ends up looking, weirdly smooth yet choppy at the same time. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, bad independent animators. When they try to animate an action scene with too many frames, it just looks really slow. And that's what, a lot of the movements look like in this, right? Because there's just too much animation, I guess. I'm not exactly an expert on this stuff, so don't expect really detailed terminology from me. So if you want to, I'm going to try and give as spoiler-free overview of the plot as possible to describe why it's bad. But essentially, the first episode is great. It's very faithful to the game. Basically, it's the plot 1-to-1 for the game, with some added brutality, I guess, which is a big problem with this show, is that it does not fit the game tonally at all. The game was like kind of just like a goofy Japanese game. I mean, it was semi-serious, but it was definitely more goofy.
I fear your crown outshines my own.
Unlike this, which is very grimdark and edgy. The main character, Ethan's, like, surrogate son gets, like, chopped and swallowed alive by the dragon, and his wife gets burned to ash, and she's pregnant, by the way. And, like, the entire town of Cassardis, or Cassardis, as they say in this, is wiped off the map. Unlike in the game, where the dragon just shows up and you attempt to fight him off, and then he takes your heart, right? And you become the Arisen, right? Again, none of that is spoilers, don't worry. The problem is, after this first episode, it's basically nothing like the game. They wiped out the plot completely. Now, the game didn't have that much plot to begin with, and some of it might have been confusing if you weren't really paying attention. Like, if you didn't do side quests, or you just weren't paying attention to, like, other dialogue and stuff. But for the show, they just said, we're doing our own thing. There's just nothing from the game, like, overarching plot and the whole main point of the story is in this. Like, they essentially, and yeah, okay, this might be considered a spoiler, but basically they decided to just do their own story for the show, and it really has nothing to do with the game, which sucks. It's horrible. It's like, why'd you even bother? Other than that, I don't know, I'd say it's decently entertaining. I give it like a 6 out of 10. I don't feel like I wasted my time, but the ending in particular disappointed me. So, I don't know, if you've got like 2.5 hours to kill, yeah, sure, why not? Just binge watch through it and then move on to the next thing. Assuming you still have Netflix after the Cuties scandal. I'm not touching that shit with a 10-foot pole. Alright, so now for the spoiler discussion. So, if you've seen the show already and you just want to hear my breakdown, or you never planned to see the show and you just want to hear what I think of it, well, basically, yeah, it sucks. And here's why. Like I just said earlier, the first episode is fairly faithful. It sort of like lures you into a false sense of security, because you're like, oh, Cassardis, it gets attacked by the dragon. You wonder if this is Grigori. I don't think it is. They never say the dragon's name. But, it's the dragon. You know, it looks very close to the game version, with just less detail in the model. You know, he has this cool-ass voice, takes the main character's heart. You know, then his pawn shows up, and it's like, oh, pawns are in this. That's pretty cool. And the pawn is mostly accurate, I'd say. It's accurate without all the annoyance. You know, because if anyone who's played the game knows the pawns never shut the hell up. Even when you tell them to talk less, right, you're gonna get one or two more from, like, the void, or whatever the hell, you know, the pawn realm, whatever it's called. And you know those randos are gonna have their pawns talk as much as possible, because it's kind of funny, you know. And that gets into one of my slight disappointments from the show, is that she never says, goblins ill like fire. You know, that was something you heard like a million times. Like, there's just so many lines that were repeated over and over again in the game that it's very video gamey in like an old kind of way, an old style.
The master works all, you can't go wrong. The master works all, you can't go wrong. Have your pick, any you like. What will it be today? Have your pick, any you like. What will it be today?
So it had a certain charm to it. But no, in the show, she's mostly mute and robotic until toward the end, where she becomes more human. Which is kind of like the game, but they don't do the bestowal spirit thing. They completely... I'll get to the ending. I'll get to the ending later, but... Anyway, like I said, this show is Monster of the Week. because the main character, all he cares about is killing the dragon after his family's dead. So he never goes to Grand Soren, that's a pretty notable cutout to like get rid of the huge city and get rid of the whole subplot with the Duke having dealt with the dragon before, which is why he's immortal and why he's rich and powerful, because of his deal with the dragon. Which also brings up the whole, they got rid of the deal with the dragon thing too. That it never happens. Even though they imply that the Duke got the deal, because, you know, the Duke set up soldiers. They never say outright like, oh, this is the same Duke from over 100 years ago. But I'm assuming that's what they were implying. It just felt like a nod to people who played the game. But yeah, oh yeah, the Cult of Salvation, they're not in this. Pretty much nothing from the game is in this. The Dragon Forged is not in this. All that you get is, you get the Cyclops, the Griffin, the Hydra, a Lich, goblins, and you get one Harpy that they say is a succubus, right? And that's it, you know? I mean, I don't know. If I were to talk about good things about the show, Ethan is an actual character, the main character. He has motivation, he's a person, right? But it ties into the end. I'm just going to get to the end of the show because I said this would be a short video, right? So if you played the game, I don't know if I want to spoil the game just in case that you're going to play it, but essentially, okay, mega spoiler warning here for the game. So skip to whatever I put on screen right here. Basically, you found out that the whole point of the dragon showing up, right, was that God, the Seneschal, needs to find a replacement, right? And someone who has a strong enough will to kill the dragon, and then later take him on and defeat him, the God, gets to replace him as the new god of the world. Because all Seneschals were humans, and human will erodes over time, right? So they have to find a replacement. And that's where the dragon comes in. If you fail to kill God, then you get turned into the next dragon. So everything is a never-ending cycle in Dragon's Dogma, right? Okay, mega spoiler over. Whereas in the show, right, they completely get rid of that whole purpose. There's no grand purpose. What you learn is that there is an endless cycle in this show, like the game, but it's way more stupid and doesn't make sense. Okay, so the whole point of this story was heavy-handed BS based on this Friedrich Nietzsche quote. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. You've probably heard that before, right? And the show actually paraphrases this. Like, the dragon says, like, you know, if you gaze into the darkness, you know, don't let the darkness become you, or something like that. He says something like that. And that's literally it. Like, essentially the big test of killing the dragon is that you're supposed to see the worst that humanity has to offer, which every episode is titled with one of the 7 deadly sins and features, you know, some horrible aspect of humanity, whether it's, you know, greed, gluttony, etc., right? Unfortunately, Ethan is corrupted, and he becomes, like, you know, essentially a sociopath, and just focuses on wanting to kill the dragon, doesn't care about anybody else. Like, 2 of the side soldier characters comment on this, because they're the only recurring characters. They show up in, like, episode 3, and then later in episode 5, and they comment on how much he's changed, which feels very lazily done, by the way. Like, basically, after the sloth episode where he kills the Hydra, he just suddenly is a sociopath after that. I don't know if they were making implications, too, that, like, inversely, the pawn was becoming more human as he became less human. But it seemed very sloppily done. So basically, skipping to the end, he kills the dragon. The dragon reveals to him that the dragon wanted to die all along, because if you're a dragon, you exist just to kill humans, right? Like, that's in your nature, much like the frog and scorpion tale, right? Where he has no choice. He has to kill the humans because that's his animalistic behavior, right? And also the curse. And so, if you kill a dragon, through revenge and pride, there you go, see, one of the 7 deadly sins, then you become the next dragon. So the show ends with Ethan becoming the next dragon, and his pawn, Hannah, she becomes like a guardian for the world or whatever, now that she's basically human. Now, my problem with this is, what happens if a human vanquishes the dragon through noble purposes? Does the cycle just end? Is there not another dragon? Is that when someone ascends to become the seneschal? Is that even in this? Like, is there a seneschal? Is there a guardian to the world? They never say anything about that. The show just ends. It just has a bad ending, right? In Eastern stories, bad endings are a lot more common, right? That's like just something I guess they grow up with. In the West, that's definitely not the case. We always have happy endings. But I don't have a problem with a bad ending. You know, occasionally I'll watch a movie with a bad ending, and if it's done well, I'm fine with it, really. But here, it just makes the whole story feel pointless, right? I mean, what was the point of that 2.5 hours? What did I gain from that? I didn't learn anything. Like, what was the lesson, really? Like, when you see bad people, don't become a bad person. Still be a good person? That's the lesson. Like, what the hell kind of lesson is that, really? That's like baby shit, essentially. I don't know, the whole thing seemed kind of pointless. Just play the game, dude. Like, Dragon's Dogma is a legitimately fun game. It is very flawed. Like, very flawed. The fast travel system's terrible. The side quests are terrible. Yeah, pretty much all the side quests are terrible. The story is not that well explained and only becomes interesting toward the end. But the gameplay is really fun. Like, really, that's its claim to fame, is the gameplay. But, you know, the gameplay is all about climbing monsters and stabbing them in the face, pretty much. You know, it's like Shadow of the Colossus. You can just grab any giant monster and start climbing on their back or their neck or their hands or whatever and stab them, right? And each of the character classes is like fun and unique in its own way. Like, they essentially have, you know, the 3 typical classes. You can be fighter, mage, rogue, right? But then they have, like, advanced classes and hybrid classes, right? And all these have, like, a unique gameplay style, have unique moves and stuff. I always play the game as a fighter and then later warrior when you unlock that as the advanced class. But recently, for this review, I was playing again. I finally decided to play as a strider. And yeah, being able to climb monsters twice as fast, and strider's the rogue, essentially. And also having a bow and arrow it's a completely new gameplay style. It's fun, you know? And it's cool to have your team of pawns that rounds out your party and stuff. So, I don't know, it's a great game. I don't know if I want to say it's underrated, but it's underappreciated. It's underplayed. So, if you really want to support Dragon's Dogma to finally get a sequel, because I know I've been waiting for a long time for the sequel, just buy the game, you know? Like, Dark Arisen, I believe, was remastered for current gen, and obviously it's on PC. But, yeah, make sure you get the Dark Arisen version, even though that's the only version on current gen anyway. But, you know, if you were to buy a used copy last gen, do not get the original version of the game, for multiple reasons. 1, the fast travel system was improved, and 2, you know, Dark Arisen adds a big expansion, Bitter Black Isle, which is basically a super dungeon that's like way harder and has like a lot of cool new bosses and stuff. It's very fun, very fun. So yeah, that's it really. I mean, if anything, just play Dragon's Dogma. It's a fun game. You can get it cheap now. You know, the game's like 8 years old, and on current gen consoles, I don't know, it's probably ported like 5 years ago, something like that. So yeah, you can get it cheap. Buy it. Hopefully we'll finally get that sequel. And Netflix, do better next time, you lazy. Really? I mean, come on. Yeah, I guess this is the end card segment. Essentially, I'm probably going to be taking a break from videos, guys. I'm going to try and get out the Metroid Prime review before Crash 4. I don't know if that's what's going to end up happening, to be honest. I would like that to be the case. But I don't know, I'm getting pretty burnt out. I wanted to put out this video because I did want to get my thoughts on this just because I really like Dragon's Dogma. But yeah, I'm getting pretty burnt out because I released, what, like 3 videos last week? That's a lot for me. And none of them were successful views-wise. So that can be demotivating. you know, I'm still gonna be trying. You know, I really hope the Crash 4 video is successful, but I don't know. Other than that, you know, like, favorite, subscribe. You know, tell me what you think. Give me game recommendations, and yeah, video requests. Any of that's good. See you next time, guys.